My name is Camille Rhodes. I'm 35 years old, and 2 weeks ago my father sent me a message made up of just 8 words. Ryan will go instead of you. I've decided. That trip was a gift I had planned for him. 10 days in Hawaii, 5-star hotel, helicopter tours, tickets to the sporting event he always dreamed of. I arranged everything. But in the end, he took my seat and handed it to my younger brother, who hadn't paid a single dime. Have you ever been pushed out of something you built with your whole heart by the very person you trusted the most? No explanation. No apology. I didn't call back. I just opened my spreadsheet and started deleting rows. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, leave a like, a comment, or follow the channel. Because this story isn't just about an airplane ticket. It started there. But what was truly taken was my dignity. I still remember it clearly. 14 years old, December chill outside, my mom in the hospital for endocrine treatment, and my dad working late at the machine shop. That night, I cleaned the living room, folded some old blankets on the couch, then carried my math homework to her hospital room. No one had to ask me. I always knew what I needed to do. I wasn't remarkable. I was just the responsible eldest daughter in a traditional family where praise and rewards always went to the son. My dad used to say, "Girls don't need special treatment. They just need to stay out of the way." I spent my whole youth trying not to be a burden, never asking, never resisting. I don't know how many times I swallowed injustice before the feeling turned into a habit, an instinct to stay quiet just because of my place in the family. When my mom got better, I reorganized the entire family's finances, insurance costs, loan payments my dad had secretly taken out after getting into debt with a construction supplier. I was 15. My dad didn't thank me, but he didn't stop me either. I think in his eyes, I was useful, as long as I stayed quiet about it. Later, when I earned a full scholarship to study event planning at UCLA, my mom cried. My dad. He just asked, "If you go far away, who's going to take care of the house?" I skipped my first enrollment. My grandmother had a stroke. I stayed behind another year. No one forced me, but every glance in that house made it clear what was expected. Meanwhile, my brother, Ryan, was driven by our dad to submit his college applications, even though his GPA barely cleared the minimum. I used to believe that if I just kept sacrificing, my dad would eventually see my value. That someday he'd look at me not just as the quiet one, but as the person who held this family together. When I was 27, I bought my first apartment in San Jose. 1 bedroom, oak floors, close to a park, west-facing window. I planned to live alone. But 3 months in, Ryan called me close to midnight. "Camille, Dad can't cover the mortgage this month. Can we crash at your place for a few weeks?" A few weeks turned into 8 months. At that point, my dad had already left the machine shop and taken a part-time maintenance job at a small golf course. His income was unstable. He called me, softer than usual. "I know you're busy, sweetie, but Ryan needs direction. Let him stay. Think of it as helping the family." I didn't argue. I just texted them the door code. I also paid the utilities, without being asked. Truth is, I paid more than I ever intended to. In 2020, when my mom fell down the stairs, I signed a private nurse contract. When Ryan lost money in crypto investments, I pulled from my retirement fund to cover his credit card debt. Because my dad said, "We can't let our son get tangled in lawsuits." I always stepped back, thinking if no one else would do the right thing, then I would. I even thought this Hawaii trip could be the moment we all came together again, a final attempt to do something right. I planned it for 8 months. I picked tours based on each person's interests, hired a photographer for Dad's birthday dinner, booked an ocean view room for Mom since she struggles with sleep. I knew Ryan didn't like family vacations, but I still bought him a ticket, partly just to make Dad happy. Then I got that message. Short, cold, not a single Camille, not even a period. "Ryan will go instead of you. I've decided. I read it again and again, thinking I misread it. I checked the date, the group thread, wondering if it was some cruel joke. But no, my dad really wrote that. I wasn't part of the decision. I wasn't even acknowledged. I was just a seat to be replaced. I called my mom. She spoke vaguely. Don't be upset, sweetie. Your dad wants Ryan to gain experience. He's been unemployed for a few months now. I asked. What about the months I spent planning everything? She sighed. I know. But just let it go, okay? For the sake of the family. Let it go. I'd heard those words so many times growing up. Let your brother have the jacket, the dessert, the better grade, the early college start, the scholarship. And now, let go of the seat I paid for on the trip I planned. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt numb. Like someone had erased my name from a family ledger I had worked years to keep balanced. I turned off my phone and opened my laptop. In the family trip folder, I created a new document, reclassification. I opened the trip budget spreadsheet and deleted Dad from the recipient cell. I changed retirement celebration to relationship assessment. In the notes column, I typed, love can't be forced. Boundaries must be clear. Then I began listing every expense I'd covered for the family since 2015. Not because I wanted them to pay me back, but because for the first time I needed to see clearly what I had given up. So I'd stop telling myself they didn't mean it every time I was left behind. That was when I realized this didn't start with a Hawaii plane ticket. It started long ago, when I was taught that daughters are expected to step back, and I've stepped back far enough. I'm not someone who assumes the worst in people, but I do trust numbers. And from the moment I read Dad's message, I had a nagging feeling, not about why they changed the seat, but how it was handled so quickly, so quietly. Like it had been decided long before I knew. I pulled up my flight confirmation from Pacific Wings, the airline I'd booked back in February. A round-trip first-class ticket under my name. My membership number, my meal preferences, all there. But when I logged in again, the trip status next to the Hawaii flight read, canceled, medical emergency. I stopped breathing for a few seconds. I hadn't canceled the flight. I wasn't sick. I dialed the airline's hotline. After navigating through the menu and wading through a few bars of tinny hold music, a soft-spoken woman picked up. Thank you for holding. This is Madison. How can I help you today? I kept my voice steady. I'd like to check on the status of a ticket booked under Camille Roads for a flight on August 22nd from San Jose to Honolulu. Keystrokes clicked in the background. Then Madison replied, yes, that ticket was canceled 8 days ago. The request came from a family member who said you had a medical emergency and couldn't travel. It was logged as a call from your brother, Ryan Rhodes. I barely heard the end of her sentence. Did they provide any medical documentation? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. No, just verification using your date of birth and backup email. Then they requested to update the passenger to Ryan Rhodes. However, because this was an international fare, the system doesn't allow name changes. So the ticket was marked as unused. A partial tax refund was sent back to the Amex business account used to purchase the ticket. I stared at my screen, my hand clenched so tightly it turned pale. Did anyone try to use that ticket to check in? Madison hesitated for a second. According to the system log, a man named Ryan Rhodes came to the check-in counter at San Jose Airport on Tuesday. He presented a QR code and said he was Camille Rhodes, probably a mix-up in the info. But the agent noticed a mismatch in ID, and the case was flagged as a minor identity fraud. I don't even remember how I hung up the phone. All I know is, after the call, I sat there in silence for what felt like forever. Then I stood up and walked straight into the storage room. In the third drawer, where I kept old paperwork, I pulled out the dusty old laptop Ryan used when he was crashing at my place last year. I had kept it, thinking I'd get it fixed and give it to someone who needed it. I plugged it in. The screen came to life slowly, and in the bottom corner was still the old background photo. Ryan smiling next to his new drone. I clicked through a few folders, not expecting much, just following a vague instinct. Then I saw it. A folder named Docs for Cam, created about a month ago, right around the time I started emailing the Hawaii tour confirmations to the family. Inside were scanned images of my ID, converted into photo files, and altered with basic editing software. There was also a fake doctor's letter, in PDF format, claiming I had a spinal injury that made long-distance flying impossible. It was signed by someone named Dr. Elman from a clinic that didn't exist. My hands were shaking as I saved everything to a USB stick. Then I opened my email to check recent activity. Strangely, my secondary email, the one I used to send tickets and QR codes to Dad, had been accessed from a strange IP address. The same day the system logged a request to cancel my ticket. There was no doubt left in my mind. The person who impersonated me was none other than my own father. And Ryan. They didn't just take my seat. They used my name, my records, and my identity to fuel a plan I was never told about, never asked about. It all happened quietly, but it was organized. And the cruelest part was how my father acted like it was normal, like it was normal, like it was for the family. I remembered the last time I talked to him, how he had gently asked, "Did you check in for the flight yet?" His voice had been so calm, almost caring. Turns out he wasn't asking out of concern, he was waiting for the right moment to interfere. I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself cry over a plane ticket, or the exploitation of people who were supposed to love me. Instead, I opened the reclassification spreadsheet. I added 2 new entries. Identity fraud risk level, high. Privacy abuse risk level, irreversible. Then I created a new file, potential legal action. I didn't know how far I'd go with it yet, but for the first time in years, I knew I had to start somewhere, with the truth, with evidence. Not for revenge, but for protection. Not just for me, but for the part of me that still believed family was supposed to be the safest place. And now I knew, if I didn't act, they'd do it again, a second time, or a third. I picked up my phone and took pictures of the emails, the call logs, the check-in rejection screen. Then I called the lawyer who had helped me buy my apartment last year. I set a meeting with him for Monday morning. The first meeting to talk about dignity. Not something you can buy with a plane ticket, but clearly something that can be stolen with just one click. I arrived in Hawaii on Wednesday afternoon. The sun cut through the car windows like thin blades of glass. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. And I didn't stay at the Sheraton where I had booked rooms for the whole family, the same hotel where my brother was now soaking in a hot tub, snapping stories like he'd just conquered the world. I chose a smaller hotel in Kailua, nearly 10 miles away. Not because I was hiding, but because I needed the distance to see things clearly, from afar, detached. Like someone who had once poured her whole heart in, only to be cropped out of the picture. That night I showed up to Dad's birthday party. A party I had spent 6 months planning, from the menu, sound system, down to the napkin colors. But I wasn't there to celebrate. I wore a simple black dress, my hair pulled back in a high bun, and I carried an envelope in my hand. The party was outside, in a beachfront garden. String lights hung from the palms. Champagne glasses sparkled in the hands of guests I mostly didn't know. Dad was on a small stage, holding a mic, beaming. Next to him stood Ryan, confident in a navy suit, patting Dad on the back like the trip had been all his doing. I stood behind the lights, watching. "And it's wonderful to share this moment with my son, Ryan," Dad was saying. A promising young man, taking his first strong steps into the media world. "I believe he'll go far." I took a deep breath and stepped toward the stage as the crowd started applauding. A few people noticed me and nodded politely. Dad froze. I didn't speak right away. I just placed the envelope on the table next to the podium. Inside were copies of the tour booking, the event contract, and the payment receipts, all under the name Camille Rhodes. My name. I picked up the mic. Sorry to interrupt, but something needs to be clarified. All eyes turned toward me. Dad stood frozen, his eyes wide. Ryan turned away, swallowing his drink. This entire trip was paid for out of my personal account. Every plane ticket, every hotel night, every planned activity, I arranged it all. But 4 days ago, I was removed from the list under a lie. That I'd been in an accident and couldn't travel. My ticket was canceled as an emergency case. The people behind it are my own family. A murmur spread through the tables. Dad stayed silent. I looked him straight in the eye. I just want to ask one thing. Why? He gave a half smile, set down the mic, and stepped toward me. You're overreacting. This is my birthday. Do you really want to ruin it in front of everyone? I answered quietly but firmly. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just putting the truth where it belongs. He glanced around, as if scanning the room for damage control. Ryan needs opportunities. He needs real-world experience. You've had more than enough. And those opportunities come from impersonating your daughter? Ryan stepped in, speaking softly. I didn't know everything. Dad said you'd understand. I looked him in the eye, then turned back to Dad. I'm not angry because you chose Ryan. I'm angry because you never once chose me. Not in 35 years. The air fell silent, like even the ocean breeze had stopped blowing. I stepped off the stage, leaving everyone behind as soft music floated awkwardly in the background. On the way back to the hotel, I got a message from my mom. Was it really worth it? I didn't respond. I just opened my spreadsheet and added a new line. Reputational damage, impossible to quantify. And if you think a ruined birthday party was the worst part, you haven't heard what came next. Follow along if you've ever felt erased by your own family. I left that party with a strange kind of emptiness. Not shame. Something deeper, like I'd finally hit bottom. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel hurt anymore. Just a long, stretching silence, like the echo of a room no one had stepped into for years. Back at the hotel, I turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a long time. The glow of my phone lit up my face as the messages started pouring in. From my mom, Ryan, an aunt in Minnesota, even an old neighbor who used to see me studying on the porch as a kid. Everyone had their own version of what just happened. My mom called. I picked up. There was just a long sigh on the other end before she said, "You know I never wanted it to go this far." I cut in. You knew from the start, didn't you? Silence. You knew Dad and Ryan used my name to cancel my ticket, to change the name on the account, to fabricate a medical emergency that never happened. Still silence. You didn't speak up because you were scared of Dad, because you didn't want to cause drama, because you didn't think it was wrong. Or maybe you thought I'd stay quiet again. That's not it, she whispered. It all happened so fast. I thought maybe you'd understand later. No, Mom. I understand perfectly. I understand that in this family, silence is valued more than truth. I hung up. Then I got up, opened my laptop, and logged into the tour booking system. I'd been thinking about this ever since I got the cancellation notice. Now it was time. I canceled every single activity I had booked under my name. The helicopter tour over Mauna Loa, the traditional Hawaiian cooking class, the sunset photo shoot I had prepaid 6 months in advance. After each confirmation click, I added a note. Cancellation due to identity violation and payment breach. The confirmation emails started flooding my inbox. I saved every single one. I knew this would cause chaos for them. But I also knew this trip no longer belonged to me. Next, I logged into the Smart Lock app for my condo in San Jose. I had previously set up unique access codes for Mom and Ryan. Now I deleted them all, then changed the master code. I also activated the motion-triggered camera at the front door, synced straight to my phone. Then I sent an email to the law firm that had helped me close on my condo back in 2019. Subject line: Request for support. Residency status update and lease agreement draft. I had no intention of kicking them out right away. I just wanted to reset the boundaries. That apartment is mine. My parents never contributed a single dollar. And yet, for the past 4 years, they've treated it like a shared inheritance. Like I'm just the kind daughter letting them stay out of generosity. I pulled up the payment history. In 4 years, they had only paid rent 5 times, each time short by 20 or 30 bucks. Some months, I even got texts from Ryan saying, "Lost my wallet. Can you cover me? I'll send it back next week." But next week never came. I don't need the money back. I just want the truth acknowledged, that they took advantage of my silence to cross my boundaries, that they thought I'd always be the one who can handle it. Just as I was about to shut the laptop, there was a knock at my hotel room door. I looked through the peephole. It was Ryan. I opened the door and waited quietly. He stood there in a wrinkled shirt, still wearing the guest wristband from the party. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. Ryan didn't sit. He stood near the door, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't think things would go this far. Dad said you'd understand. He said I should go to Hawaii in your place to learn from the experience, to grow content for the new project. And you believed that? He looked down. I know you're mad, but doing that, in front of everyone, you embarrassed the whole family. I let out a soft laugh, not a happy one. Are you talking about the party where Dad thanked you for a trip you didn't pay for? Or are you talking about the embarrassment of using my name to get through airport security? I just think, if you had talked to us first, it wouldn't have come to this. I stepped closer, voice calm but steady. You think I should have sat down and negotiated with someone who impersonated me, stole my ticket, spent my money just to save face for you? Ryan went silent. I pointed to the door. I'm not angry, but I've made a decision. I won't let you or Dad define what's reasonable anymore. He looked at me for a few seconds, then turned and left without another word. I closed the door gently. The room returned to stillness. I knew after tonight there was no going back, but maybe that was never what I needed anyway. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and sat at the desk by the window. The beach outside was still misty. Everything felt quiet, calm. But inside, the data kept flashing in my mind, like memory had turned into a report. I went over every file in my evidence folder. Screenshots of unauthorized email logins, PDF copies of the ticket name change requests, bank transaction histories, and audio clips from recent calls with customer support. Each file was carefully labeled, clear names, timestamps, verification numbers from the airline and the service providers. I sent everything to the law office of Mr. Calvin Rhodes, a seasoned, meticulous man who helped me with my mortgage paperwork 3 years ago. In the email, I also attached a recording of my conversation with Ryan from the hotel room last night. I didn't record it to hurt my brother. I recorded it because I needed the truth, not to press charges, but to remind myself that this time, I'm not letting it slide. About an hour later, Calvin called back. His voice was calm and steady, just like always. "Camille, I've reviewed all the documents. There's no need to wait. We have enough grounds to file a criminal complaint for identity theft, payment fraud, and misappropriation of personal assets." I exhaled. I'd rather go the civil route first. I don't want to drag my father and brother through criminal court, not if I can avoid it. Calvin paused. I understand. Then we'll file a civil lawsuit with 2 goals: full financial restitution and a court-issued restraining order, barring them from interfering with your personal assets moving forward. Thank you. Do it, Calvin. All the way. He answered simply, I'll start drafting today. Don't worry, Camille. Everything will be handled by the book. I hung up and sat still for a while, feeling my chest settle like a lake after a storm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for standing up for myself. And maybe that's the first step toward not constantly having to prove I'm the good daughter. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. It was someone from the fraud department at Phoenix National Bank, where I hold my Amex business account. Hi, Camille. This is Laura. We're investigating an unusual deposit refund request made from your Amex card. The person who made the request was Mr. Thomas Rhodes. I closed my eyes and steadied myself. That's my father. The account is under my name. Every transaction requires two-step verification. Right. And actually, we already declined the transaction this morning. But we found that the email address you used to open a secondary account 3 years ago had been changed to a new one. The reason listed was urgent request by Camille due to loss of access. I let out a breath. Exactly what I was afraid of. I didn't make that request. Laura continued, thanks for confirming. We've temporarily disabled payment features on the card and flagged your account as a security risk. We'll also need you to send over a copy of your ID, signature sample, and a verification form to proceed with the fraud investigation. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'll send it today. I hung up. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen as I opened a new file. Legal risks from family ties. The title sounded heavy, but I needed to call it what it was. And then I wondered how many people out there have had their relatives quietly use their name, their card, their signature, only to shrug and say, it's family. Probably more than we think. If you've ever been through something like this, or know someone who has, share the story below. Sometimes, telling the truth is the first step to reclaiming yourself. Later that afternoon, I received a confirmation email from Attorney Calvin. The case had been filed with the Santa Clara County Court in California. The first hearing was scheduled for the 9th of next month. I sat quietly in a sunlit room, listening to the steady sound of waves outside the window. Part of me felt relieved, the other part heavy, like I had just pulled out a knife that had been stuck in my shoulder for far too long. I didn't know where this would all lead, but at least this time, I wasn't standing still. I returned to San Jose 3 days after the birthday party, carrying a suitcase full of legal documents, a few simple outfits, and a state of mind I couldn't quite name. The city welcomed me with a windless afternoon. The familiar streets hadn't changed, but inside me, everything had. I didn't go home right away. I stopped by a small cafe near the park, ordered a hot latte, and sat in a quiet corner where I could see the apartment building gate from a distance. My eyes stayed on my phone, waiting for an update from the property manager I had hired on short notice during the trip. It took just 1 day for them to hand-deliver the new lease agreement to my parents and Ryan, with a clear market-rate rental price, defined terms, and a 10-day response deadline. I wasn't trying to evict them. I just wanted them to understand that from now on, everything comes with boundaries. By late afternoon, I got a message from the manager. Delivered in person. They stayed silent, didn't sign, no response. I nodded, as if I already knew that would be the case. That night, I returned to my apartment. The door was still locked. Everything was still in place, except for 3 pairs of shoes by the closet. My father's dress shoes, Ryan's worn-out sneakers, and my mother's leather loafers. I walked straight to my room and locked the door from the inside. No greetings. No need for small talk. The next morning, as I came out to make coffee, my mom was sitting at the dining table, flipping through the lease agreement. My dad wasn't there. Neither was Ryan. "You're actually doing this?" she asked, eyes still on the page. I poured hot water into my mug and answered softly, "Did you think I was joking? This is your home. You don't need to do this." I turned to her and looked her in the eye. Exactly. Because it's my home, everything needs to be clear. I can't keep letting people live in my space, use my name, and just assume I won't say anything. She froze. "Your dad, he was just thinking of Ryan. He doesn't have anything yet." I set my coffee down on the table, eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't have anything either. Do you remember when I gave up my first-year scholarship to stay home and take care of Grandma? Do you remember how I stayed by your side for 6 weeks when you were hospitalized, while Ryan was busy live streaming his video games? Did anyone think of me back then? She didn't answer. You know I'm not wrong, Mom, but the way you're doing this, it's harsh. I gave a small, cold smile. Mom, if I'd been any softer, they would have erased my name from the household registry. I walked straight to the balcony, leaving her at the table still holding the contract she never thought would be real. By late afternoon, Ryan came home. He was with Dad. I heard the door open, followed by my father's deep, gravelly voice. You're back? I didn't respond. Less than 5 minutes later, Dad knocked on my door. I opened it and stood firmly in the doorway, not inviting him in. I don't want this to go too far. It already has, Dad. Ever since you used my name to cancel the flight. Ever since you lied to the airline. Ever since you quietly changed the credit card information tied to my account. He stared at me, his face tightening. I did it all for Ryan. He needs a chance. And you've always been strong, successful. What did you really lose? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My voice turned sharp. What did I lose? Do you even realize what I've lost? My reputation, my trust, the right to control my own life. And more than anything, I lost the feeling that I belong in this family. You're talking like we're enemies now. His voice turned tense. I don't want to be enemies, but I won't keep being the victim. The air between us froze. Dad took a step back, staring at me with a mix of anger and helplessness. Fine. If you want to fight this through the law, go ahead. I said nothing more. I closed the door. That night, I got a short text from Ryan. Do you really think this is the best way? I didn't reply. I simply saved the message in a folder labeled Lawsuit Records and turned off my phone. A few days later, I received an express envelope from Calvin's law firm. Inside were the official documents, every original page of the civil suit filed with the court. I sat on my bed, opened the envelope, and gently ran my fingers over the paper. Not because I loved legal paperwork, but because I knew every word on those pages was a piece of my dignity I was reclaiming. This wasn't about winning. It was about boundaries, and making sure they understood. I was no longer the Camille from years ago, the one who stayed quiet, tolerated everything, and kept telling herself one day the family will change. They wouldn't change, but I had. The preliminary hearing took place on a Monday morning. San Jose was colder than usual. I sat on the plaintiff's bench, clutching my file of evidence, my mind oddly calm. Across from me, my father wore a dark suit, his expression composed like he was leading an engineering briefing, not being sued by his own daughter. Ryan sat beside him, avoiding my gaze the entire time. The courtroom was quiet. Just the judge, a clerk, my attorney, and the defense counsel. My mother wasn't there. A small part of me was relieved. My attorney presented the case clearly. Identity theft, unauthorized access to personal accounts, using my information to commit fraud and gain personal advantage. One by one, the evidence was shown on the screen. The flight cancellation email, the unauthorized login IP address, the forged signature on the name change request, even the audio clip of my father admitting, I did it because Ryan needs a chance. My dad didn't deny it. He only said, everything I did was for the family. I didn't think she'd take this private matter to a public courtroom. I looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, just a steady voice. Family doesn't mean you never call out what's wrong. By the end, the judge scheduled the official trial date and issued a preliminary ruling. The defendants were barred from accessing any of my accounts, assets, or personal information from that point forward. A temporary restraining order was also granted pending the full trial. When I left the courthouse, I walked down the steps in silence. The sunlight was soft, casting shadows from the trees like time itself was leaving its mark. I didn't feel relieved nor victorious. I just felt like justice had begun, slowly, but necessarily. 3 days later, I found a handwritten envelope in my mailbox. No sender's name, but the handwriting was so familiar I didn't have to guess. I brought it inside, sat down, and opened it. Inside was a letter from my mother. Her handwriting hadn't changed, slanted, delicate, leaning slightly left. I read slowly, line by line. Camille, I don't know where to start, maybe with an apology, but I know that alone isn't enough. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I saw what your father did. I knew Ryan wasn't innocent, but I was afraid. Not of you. Of losing the family I'd been trying to hold together all these years. I paused, my breath sinking. I remember when you were 13, folding up Grandma's old coat and walking more than a mile to bring it to the hospital. I remember the night you stayed up calculating the budget when your father lost his job. I've never forgotten all that you've done, but I let resignation drown out what was right. I hoped you'd stay quiet again, and I was wrong. I folded the letter before reaching the end. I didn't know if she wrote it out of guilt, or because she realized the court was involved. But for the first time, her words carried something I hadn't felt in years: sincerity. That evening, while reviewing documents for the upcoming hearing, I got a bank notification. The initial restitution payment had been deposited into my account, sent by Ryan Rhodes. I didn't rush to use it. I transferred the entire sum into a newly opened account, one I'd set up a week earlier for a project I hadn't told anyone about. The Whitaker Renewal Fund, a small foundation to support women financially exploited by family members. I didn't need to keep the money as revenge. I wanted to turn it into a statement. The past may hurt, but I get to choose how I respond. I worked through the night finalizing legal filings, grant paperwork, and notifying my attorney that I was rejecting the settlement offer. I wasn't suing for an apology with strings attached. I was suing to redefine my boundaries. If you've ever been hurt by someone you once called family, and you've asked yourself whether you were being too harsh for standing up for the truth, please remember this: silence isn't love, and justice doesn't need an apology to begin. 2 weeks after the court issued the preliminary ruling, my dad sent a settlement proposal to my lawyer. It came with no apology, just terms. I'd withdraw the lawsuit, and he'd reimburse a portion of the damages under the label contribution to apartment maintenance costs. I sat alone in the conference room as Calvin, my attorney, slid the document across the table. I read every line, then looked up. They still don't get it. Calvin simply nodded. This proposal doesn't meet any standard of good faith. They're trying to minimize the damage, save face, and silence you. I folded the paper without a second thought. I reject it. That evening, Ryan called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since that night at the hotel in Hawaii, almost a month ago. I heard you turned down the offer. I did. Don't you think that's a bit harsh? We're family. Ryan, this isn't about feelings anymore. It's about principle. No one gets to call themselves family while using my identity like it's a shared resource. He was quiet for a few seconds, then asked, "So what do you want?" My voice was calm. "It's not about what I want. It's about no longer pretending." The next day, I went to the notary's office to finalize the setup of the Whitaker Renewal Fund, the name I chose to honor my great-grandmother, the first woman in our family to work as an accountant, who was forced to give up her career after marriage. I used the entire restitution payment I had received from Ryan, along with a portion of my personal savings, to establish a legal aid fund for women financially exploited by their families. Women who were pressured to co-sign loans they didn't benefit from. Women who were guilted for not helping out their own. Women like me. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to restore the meaning of justice, something I was once taught was a man's business. Launch wasn't flashy. I just sent a short email to a few friends in the nonprofit world, along with a personal letter explaining why this mattered. Within 3 days, over 40 emails landed in my inbox. Some women wrote, I thought I was the only one. Others sent just one sentence. Thank you for not staying silent. I read each one. I saved every message. Each note felt like a thread pulling me closer to the younger version of myself, the girl who used to sit in the kitchen corner, listening to the adults talk about money, never once being asked what she thought. One afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Allison. She lived in Sacramento, 39 years old, and had co-signed a business loan for her younger brother. He skipped town, and she lost her house. Her voice trembled when she said, "I don't know where to begin again, but I saw your name on the fund's website, and I thought, maybe someone out there understands." I listened without interrupting. Then I told her I wasn't a lawyer, and I wasn't a licensed counselor, but I could connect her with the right people and send her template documents for filing a civil suit if she chose to go that route. I invited her to our first public legal clinic scheduled for next month. After the call, I stepped out onto my balcony. Autumn had started to touch San Jose with its gentle chill. A soft glow from the apartment across the way spilled onto my deck like a quiet thread of warmth. I stood still, listening for the smallest sounds. The breeze brushing past the potted plants, the measured steps of someone's shoes below, and my own heartbeat slowly returning to peace. I suddenly thought about the very first month I paid rent for my parents and Ryan when they moved in with me. I still kept that receipt, not to reclaim the money, but to remind myself that I once did everything in silence. Not anymore. I opened an email from Calvin. It was a draft of the court filing to officially decline the settlement and confirm my intent to pursue the case fully. I signed it, attached proof of the fund transfer, and hit send. It only took a second. But in that second, I felt like I'd closed an old chapter with a firm period and capitalized the first letter of the next one, a chapter where I no longer needed permission to be respected. A year after filing the lawsuit, I received a package on my birthday. No card, no signature, just a worn brown envelope sealed with aging tape. The sender's address was from a household in Bakersfield. I opened it in the kitchen as the kettle began to simmer. Inside was a handwritten letter with a single sentence. "If you still consider me your father, withdraw everything before this goes too far." No greeting. No punctuation. Just one line, written in the same handwriting that once guided my hand as a child when I first learned to write Camille. I stood in silence for a few minutes, not sad, not angry, just a feeling that closely resembled confirmation. A quiet confirmation that something between us had broken in a way that would never be put back together. I folded the letter and set it on the counter, next to another unopened envelope, the official court notice. The final ruling had been delivered the day before. I had won. The family was ordered to repay all damages, cover legal fees, and issue a formal reparation for reputational harm. I didn't feel happy. I didn't celebrate. I just brewed a cup of black tea, stepped onto the balcony, and sat quietly under the pale light of an early fall morning. I used to think that winning would bring relief, but the feeling was closer to stillness. Not because justice was served, but because I no longer needed to reclaim what should never have been taken in the first place. I didn't tell my mom about the verdict. I didn't notify Ryan. I knew they had received the court's letter, and I knew they understood. This time, I wouldn't be coming back like I used to. A few weeks later, I finally flew to Hawaii, not out of revenge, not even as a reward, just because I never got to go, and because some wounds can only soften when we finally give ourselves what others once denied. I booked a small room on the north side of the island, not the Sheraton, not a fancy oceanfront hotel, just a quiet homestay with a wooden balcony overlooking a stretch of green reeds. That first evening, I walked to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet. The waves lapped gently. I brought a notebook, sat on an old wooden bench, and began writing down things I had buried for years. Not a list of wounds, but a list of the times I had denied myself, just to keep up appearances for something we called family. I wrote about the time I gave up my freshman scholarship to stay home and care for my grandma. About the nights I took hospital shifts for my mom. About Ryan's debt I paid off with my very first savings. about the family parties I planned, but no one ever mentioned my name. About the times I was told I was overreacting, just because I didn't want to stay silent anymore. I wrote line by line, then crossed out each one. Not to erase, but to close the chapter. The next morning, I got up early and made coffee in the little kitchen of the homestay. The host was an older Hawaiian woman named Marita. She wore a loose white linen shirt, had graying hair, and spoke in a deep, warm voice. "You traveling alone?" she asked as she saw me packing my backpack. I nodded. "I once came here with someone, but we never made it, so now I'm going alone." She smiled gently. "Some journeys you have to walk alone for them to be real." I carried my backpack to the local bus stop. No tours, no photos, no fixed itinerary. I let myself drift across the island like water between rocks, not resisting, but not getting swept away either. One evening, a sudden downpour rolled in. I sat on the homestay porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain drum against the tin roof. I picked up my phone and opened old messages from my mom, from Ryan, from my dad, and one by one I quietly deleted them, not to cut ties, but to stop waiting for a reply. When I returned to San Jose, I opened the door to my apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor through the window blinds. The apartment was still quiet, just like before, but I wasn't the same. I hung a new photo in the living room. A picture of me in Hawaii, standing alone on a volcanic rock beach, not smiling broadly, but with eyes looking straight ahead. Below the frame, I taped a small handwritten note. "This is my seat. No one needs to give it back." Then I walked into the kitchen, made myself a cup of ginger tea, sat down at the table, and for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what needed fixing. I was thinking about what I could build from the very place that had once crumbled. My story may have ended with silence, but I know that somewhere out there, many are still living in relationships where boundaries are blurred, where sacrifice is expected as duty, and where family love is sometimes used as a reason to keep hurting. About you? Have you ever felt shut out of something you worked so hard to protect? Have you stayed silent just to keep the peace, only to wonder if that silence cost too much? I want to hear from you, your thoughts on family, fairness, and what it takes to finally stand up for yourself. Share your story or perspective in the comments below. You never know. What you write might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if you want to keep following these real, heartfelt, and emotional stories about life, family, hard choices, and quiet courage, hit that follow button so you don't miss the next episode. Because sometimes one well-timed story can change the way we see ourselves. See you in the next story.